for liftoff in T-minus 30.
Stand by for further instructions, Minnesota Black Room Regiment.
Secondary guidance systems engaged.
Minnesota Black Room Regiment, it will be on my mark.
All systems are a go. All systems are a go.
Minnesota Black Room Regiment, you are over the target. You are authorized to fire at will.
Hey, thanks for being here. Thanks if you tuned in to the TC's Walk and Talk here just a little bit ago. Thanks for doing that. Thanks for switching over here, shifting gears. This is not a conversation that I'm looking forward to having, but it's a conversation that needs to be had. And it's a heartbreaking because it's continuing to show what I've been saying now for many years about the nature of the institution of policing in the United States and as a whole here in the state of Minnesota. So before we get onto that, I want to give everybody a big shout out for being channel members and the show producer level channel members, whether they're through Subscribestar. You can find me on Subscribestar if you want to support me there. You can support here on YouTube by becoming a channel member at any level. It helps. It doesn't matter what level you pick. I'm thankful for all of that. Super chats, super stickers, thank yous, things like that are great. Sharing this content out as I'm streaming it and after I stream it, all of those things are very important. They really do help. As much as I love doing the Think Local, Act Local stuff and the walk and talks, those things are more for the everyday. Let's just enjoy our conversations. Let's enjoy our time together. This content, however, is different, and it is far more important because we need to get people talking. As you can see, the title is Police Corruption Runs Rampant in Minnesota. Is this an U.S. problem? But it's also a better question to ask, is this an us problem? And I want to say it's a combination of both. It's a combination of a U.S. problem and it's a combination of an us problem. I've been doing a lot of talking for the last hour and a half, so bear with me. When I say that this is a combination of a U.S. and an us problem, it's because we've buried our heads in the sand for far too long. I'm going to show you a story here, folks, about a postal worker here in Minnesota who died in police custody. And so here we go. Let's see. Let's make this as big as possible. I know you guys probably can't see that all that well, but is this one better? No, this one better. A little bit. Let's try this. Yeah, we'll go with this one. So this one is Mansu St. Cloud. Excuse me. Which one are we looking at? Okay. Minnesota postal worker died in jail cell after officer ignored signs of stroke, lawsuit says. So the family of a Minnesota postal worker is filing this lawsuit after police and correctional officers allegedly ignored signs of his stroke for hours and he died in custody. I'm going to actually just put myself back on full screen. And I'm going to put myself in there. So, and I will read this to you and then I'll link the article in the description of the video for you guys to look at later. According to the lawsuit, Kingsley Fifi Bimbong Bim Pong, left work early on November 16th, 2024, due to a headache, and he was pulled over by an Eagan police officer after he drove into oncoming traffic. From responding officer's body camera, the lawsuit says Bim Pong exhibited serious physical and cognitive abnormalities. Bim Pong could not tell Eagan officers who pulled him over the simplest facts: his own name, where he was coming from, where he was going, or where he lived. According to the lawsuit filed by head attorney Katie Bennett, the responding officer called a drug recognition evaluator. So this is DRE. For those of you that don't know, DRE in Minnesota, anywhere in the United States, are officers, deputies, troopers, whatever, that have a higher level of recognition, our ability to recognize when someone's under the influence of something other than alcohol. So basically, this man, not basically, factually, this man is not responding to them, and factually, he left work because of a serious headache that he was having. So law enforcement sees him driving down the road, almost drives into traffic. They pull him over, and their first assumption is, because he can't tell him all these things like, where are you going, where are you coming from, who are you, they're assuming he's under the influence, because that's how police are conditioned to respond. They're conditioned to immediately assume that whatever's going on with you, it's criminal. You must be a criminal. So they're conditioned to treat you in that moment not like you need help, but like a criminal. So because they couldn't get an odor of alcohol, and I would imagine they probably even tried to trump up this idea that maybe it's weed, and they couldn't get an odor of marijuana on him. So again, they call this drug recognition evaluator and to come and report to the scene. Now, that sounds like, okay, they're doing due diligence to a degree. Now, the problem with that assumption is, there again, they didn't assume that he needed help. They didn't assume that maybe this is a medical issue. They assumed criminal behavior on his part. Okay, stranger, I'm gonna highlight this comment. If you act like a dirtbag, you get treated like a dirtbag. No, that's not how you should be treated. They're human beings who deserve to be treated like human beings. And driving down the road because you left work early from a headache and almost driving into traffic is something that needs to be addressed, but you don't deserve to be treated like a dirtbag because you're having a medical emergency. And that's their assumption, is that he was a dirtbag, just like you assumed he was a dirtbag. But it gets better, folks. Bootlickers like this have continue to defend law enforcement in this situation, both Eagan Police and the Dakota County Sheriff's Office and the Dakota County Sheriff's Office detention deputies. So the DRE officer shows up, doesn't even conduct all of his DRE steps. So what they say here is the responding officer called a drug recognition evaluator who didn't complete a typical 12-step evaluation to determine if Bim Pong was under the influence of drugs or alcohol. The officers noted that he did not smell of alcohol and found nothing in his car to indicate drug or alcohol use. They found nothing, but they continued to treat him like a dirtbag. At the traffic stop site and throughout the evening, the lawsuit states the officers had multiple conversations discussing whether Bim Pong was suffering from a medical issue. They discussed it and they still chose to not do anything. Let that sink in. These cops discussed, could this possibly be medical? And they chose to arrest him and take him into the Dakota County Detention Center anyway. People don't deserve to be treated like dirtbags. People don't deserve to be treated like criminals. People deserve to be treated with dignity and humanity. And that's not what they did. The officers then placed Bim Pong under arrest, took him to the Eagan Police Department for a blood draw. They're further criminalizing this man. While at the facility, the lawsuit says Bimpong stumbled and remained confused and at times nodded off to sleep. An emergency medical provider at the station, which would have been the Dakota County Detention Center, asked officers if they were planning to take him to the hospital, but the responding officer said, "It's a whole thing. It's a whole thing." So I'm going to tell you from my years and years and years of experience, what this guy did, what this officer did, was he just basically insinuated that the dude was faking, that he was acting for attention to try and get out of trouble. And instead, officers transported Bimpong to the Dakota County Jail, the lawsuit says. While transporting him, the responding officer was recorded on body cam video saying, "If this dude having a stroke?" But he cut off because he muted his camera. Let that sink in. This asshole cop, this asshole cop with other cops discusses if this is a medical issue. They still choose to arrest him. They still choose to transport him to the Dakota County Jail. And on his way, as he's muting his camera, he's asking, "Is this guy having a stroke?" So this dude is recognizing the medical condition here. This person who's trained to protect and serve is recognizing the medical condition and still chooses to treat this man like a criminal. Why? Because he's conditioned to see everybody he interacts with as a criminal. It's my last day on alcohol for a while, folks, so you're just going to have to put up with it. Yeah, Avi. Yes, Jen, we are seeing more and more of this every day. Absolutely. And AVA, he just had to get the bad guy. What a joke for a peace officer. Absolutely correct. So, folks, please help me, take this out past mainstream media. Let's share this out. Let's get people from, the what the hell's people from over on Veteran Nation and other places. Let's get them on this. I love to have people commenting on this because a lot of the people who watch over at Veteran Nation and other places, they're back the blue types, back the blue at all cost types. They absolutely are. Dirt White Philly. There should not be a mute function that in of itself gives the police force the ability to be criminal themselves. Absolutely. Thank you for sharing it, Jen. So we're gonna get down here because it gets better. It absolutely gets better. According to the suit, Bimpong arrived at the jail where he lost balance and had trouble walking. Despite needing help walking to the jail, Bimpong's booking paperwork said he did not require further evaluation. In the jail cell, the suit says he stumbled and limped and rolled on the ground for hours. Dakota County jail procedures require that all inmates are observed by a staff member at least once every 30 minutes. So we're going to clarify that's not just Dakota County jail procedures. So even though the jails are independently operated by the local sheriff's office in the state of Minnesota, that's the one thing that the sheriff's office in the state of Minnesota is required to do. According to Minnesota state statutes and according to the Minnesota Constitution, the sheriff is required to provide detention services. That's the only thing that they're required to provide. That's it. However, every single county in the state of Minnesota has a sheriff's office, but not every county has a detention center. So they have to contract with counties that do have detention centers. One of those would be a Dodge County in Minnesota. It's a small county here in southeast Minnesota. It contracts with Steele County for most of their detention, sometimes with Olmsted County. So jail staff, according to Minnesota DOC, which supervises not the jail itself, but sets the standards for how detention centers have to operate for the safety and well-being of those in their custody, in their care, because once you come into a detention center, you are now a ward of the state. It is a responsibility of the government to make sure that you're safe. They set a policy that says it's no more than once every 30 minutes or no longer than 30 minutes that you have to be checked on by staff to ensure your safety and well-being. So multiple officers observed Bimpong struggling on the ground for several hours, yet marked his status as okay, the lawsuit says. He ends up losing control of his bladder, rolling around in his own urine, Bennett said, clearly in pain and struggling for hours when no one is helping him. Folks, I can tell you right now, once again, I know exactly the mindset that caused this. I know the exact mindset that caused this, and we'll get to it in just a second. A nurse entered his cell after 3 hours and 26 minutes, at which time he was cold to the touch and unresponsive. The nurse administered Narcan 3 times without a response. Now, we're going to address this part here real quick. The nurse administered Narcan 3 hours and 26 minutes, 3 times, 3 hours and 26 minutes after he entered into that cell. So that means that's basically 3 hours and 30 minutes, 3.5 hours. That means that's 6 well-being checks for the first 3 hours and 1 for that last half hour. So he's had 7 well-being checks. And in that time, no one noticed because the nurse noted that he was cold to the touch and unresponsive. That means he died relatively soon after he fell on the floor and was rolling around and urinated himself. That means that the detention staff in the Dakota County Sheriff's Office failed to make sure he was okay, failed to make sure there were signs of life. These deputies in Dakota County let this man die, and we're going to talk about why they let him die. So here's where the cover-up begins. The attorney for the family says that every step along the way with Egan and jail defendants, it was a conscious choice of deliberate inference to not bring him to the hospital. After his death, an investigation performed by the Minnesota Department of Corrections found that none of the Dakota County correctional officers were current with their first aid and CPR certifications. The investigation also found the correctional officers had failed to document any emergency medical information or conduct a mental health screening in violation of state law. The attorney says police and correctional officers, detention staff, they're not correctional officers because they don't work for the state, detention deputies acted on incorrect and unfounded assumptions about Kingsley as justification for treating a person suffering from a classic stroke symptom with callous indifference that resulted in his death. Hours after Egan officers transported Mr. Bimpong to the jail, it was discovered that he experienced a stroke which was fatal. The city of Egan said in a statement, while Mr. Bimpong's death was tragic, he was not exhibiting an objectively serious medical condition that was obvious to laypersons at the time he was in the Egan officer's custody, and there was no indication that he required emergent medical treatment. Fuck you. Fuck you all to hell. Now, here's how he died. The officers knew he was having, we have this documented through body cam footage. The officers knew he was struggling. The officers knew that he was having some sort of problem. They couldn't pinpoint any drug or alcohol related thing. They continued to treat him like a criminal. They continued to treat him like a dirtbag, like a man up above said earlier. Man. You're not a man, by the way, if that's your response. You're a fucking coward and a bootlicking piece of crap. They treated him like he was a criminal trying to get out of trouble by faking being sick. That's what they were doing. And they took that biased information, that biased perspective, they passed that on to the detention staff, the detention deputies, who failed to do their jobs because they didn't do a mental health screening. They didn't do a health screening. They tossed him in a fucking cell because he's just a dirtbag who's probably deserves what he's getting. And instead of doing their jobs, as deputies, instead of checking on him and rendering care and rendering aid, they let him die. They let him die. Let him die. And I guarantee you the conversation was like, hey, man, look at that fake. Look at that fake over there. Look at him rolling around on the cell floor, acting like he's paying. Well, sorry, buddy, if you can't do the time, don't do the crime. Hey, slacker, thanks for stopping by. But yeah, that's what they did. These people are the Egan police knew that they had someone who had a medical condition. The officer even said, "Is this guy having a stroke?" As he muted his mic on his body cam, but he didn't mute it soon enough, so they caught that part. Passed it off like it was like he was faking. In the military, we called that malingering. So they made it look like he was malingering. Gave that information to the detention deputies, to the deputies in Dakota County, and now we find out, and this is going to come as no shock to anybody who watches my show, watches my content. Dakota County is probably about the second most corrupt detention center in this our sheriff's office and agency in the state of Minnesota, only behind Sherburne County, Minnesota, and that's just what I've found in the last 2 years. They let them die. They didn't do their jobs. They did, and now Egan's police department, Egan's city council, Egan's mayor, Egan's city administration is defending the cops and saying they didn't know. So they're pushing it off on Dakota County. I want to know where the heads are. These people need to be losing their heads. Heads need to roll. How are these people? How are we not hearing that they didn't fire all of the officers, to include the supervising sergeant that day for Egan? How are they not firing the deputies in booking for Dakota County at their detention center? Those deputies gone. They need to be gone. At the very least, they need to lose their jobs. The sergeant in charge that night in Dakota County, the detention sergeant in charge that night, the deputy in charge that night needs to lose his job. The sheriff needs to be like forced into resignation. The chief deputy of detention services for Dakota County needs to lose his job. The training and compliance sergeant and his deputies need to lose their jobs because these people didn't have their certifications. You had to be certified. But folks, I've seen this behavior. We had a guy when I was working for Olmsted County. I'm not going to give his name, but we had a guy who came in and people were calling in going, "Hey, so and so swallowed a bunch of baggies of meth." Now, like don't get me wrong. If family members and friends of the criminal segment realize that all you had to do is call and say, "Hey, so and so just got arrested. He swallowed a bunch of meth. He swallowed a bunch of coke. He swallowed a bunch of marijuana," or whatever the case might be, and you immediately transported him because this phone call was made, then you would have nothing but people calling in, and you would have to have a detention center at the local hospital just for all of the people that needed to go to the hospital. Hey, Charlie Kuklins, thanks for being here. Charlie is a local Minnesotan to me. We're going to be having Charlie on because he's talking about running for office again. So, thanks for being here, Charlie. Thanks everybody for being here. I really appreciate it. I hope you guys are sharing this out. But family members are calling in. We're really worried about him. We're really, really worried about him. And the detention center staff were like, "Well, thanks for that information, but we're not going to do anything about it." Eventually, this guy leaves booking, gets down to what's referred to as intake in the Olmsted County Detention Center. And intake is where you sit to be observed for anywhere from 3 to 7, sometimes 14 or more days, to see if you're adjusting to being in custody and seeing, what your risk level is, what kind of danger you may or may not be to others or self or staff. And he's in the intake unit being supervised by staff, and he passes out. Well, the baggies of meth ruptured in his stomach and he died. He died. And the sheriff at that time, in front of his staff, comes down into the housing unit, the intake housing unit, and in front of his staff said, "What are my liabilities?" Not, "Man, this is tragic. Man, this is horrible. Man, we should have done more." What are my liabilities? And staff joked about this. Staff joked about this guy dying. Oh, it's just a matter of time. It was going to happen. This guy's a sleazeball. Yeah, that happened, folks. You could say, "Oh, you're just bitter, TC, because of what happened to you in Olmsted County." No, like some of the people in the Olmsted County Sheriff's Office and the detention center, in particular, I would still consider amongst friends. I have something to say about that too. I'm really starting to learn that I don't have the friends that I thought I had. But people joked about this man dying in custody. We had a woman um, in on child support. By the way, child support should not be treated the way it is in any state. Look, if you're going to have kids, take care of your children or you're a sleazeball. But should you be incarcerated for not paying child support? No, you just shouldn't. But this woman she was incarcerated for being behind on child support for her 10 kids. The judge agreed to release her on a bond if she could come up with $100 to get out. She couldn't get to a phone to call anybody to find out if she could get somebody to bond her out, and she was destitute. She was literally financially destitute. She was indigent. And during the lunch hour, after everybody was locked up in their cells, this woman became so distraught she hung herself. Hanged herself. That's the proper use of the word. She hanged herself in her cell and she died. And sheriff's office staff behind the scenes, off the record, were making jokes about having 10 kids and not being able to come up with enough money to bond out. I wrote about it on my Substack. Folks, it's asinine. If you knew how cops talked about you, if you knew how deputies and troopers how they talked about you, even if you're not a criminal, if you knew how they talked about you, if you knew what 98% of the average good cop thinks, you'd lose your crap. They see you all as criminals. They see you all as dirtbags. They see their bootlicker sycophants as nothing more than the irony is they see you as nothing more than a dirtbag. They do consider themselves superior to you. They do think that they are better than you. They do believe that they are the cream of the crop. Folks, if you're enjoying the content, please hit the like, hit the share, subscribe to the channel, and if you really like what I'm doing, please, I'm asking you, subscribe or not subscribe, but become a member, a channel member, either here through Subscribestar. I need the support. I need the support. What I do isn't costly, but I do need help paying the bills, and channel members do support that. Super chats help. Thank you, super stickers, all that helps. So if you would please consider supporting as I get ready to transition into the next story. But I want you to understand these conversations, they are demeaning. Detention staff, the detention deputies with the road staff, no matter where they are, they view everybody as criminal, and they view you as having deserve whatever is happening to you. And outside of hey, thank you, Charlie. Get a hold of me, by the way. I really do want to talk to you about having you on for the show. So thanks for stopping in, Charlie. They do view you as nothing more than a piece of crap, especially once those cuffs go on, you get thrown in the back of a squad, and you get brought to the detention center. You are now dehumanized. You are a pain in their ass. And there were moments I felt that same way. I may have told the story to you guys before, maybe I haven't. Oh, Jen, you do enough already. Thank you. I appreciate that. Uh, if you've heard this story from me before, please forgive me, but I'm gonna elaborate because I need to. Early in my career. Um, hey, Skipper, thank you so much. Skipper and Jen, thank you. That helps. It means a lot. So I'm gonna get a little emotional here because I feel like shit that I ever did this. Um, First couple of years of my career, I was working overnights and we had a female picked up on DUI. And don't get me wrong, folks. I think that I'll Ed Z. I'll stick around. I'll address that. Um, we had a female brought in, very attractive young lady, picked up on DUI, and um, she was annoying as fuck, to be honest with you. And she was flirting. And one of the booking deputies looked, hey, said, man, TC, could you help her make phone calls to get picked up? And I'm like, sure, absolutely. And so what they would do is they would unlock their phone and they would give us phone numbers. They were not allowed to use their phone. They were not allowed to send text messages or anything like that. And she was being very flirtatious and being very arrogant. And she's like, at one point she's like, I'm too sexy to be locked up. You don't want me locked up. Come on, you can help me get out of here. Let me use my phone. They're not going to answer if they don't see it coming from my phone. And I'm like, I'm sorry, this is how we have to do that. And so just give me the numbers. And she just kept going. And then she got even more flirtatious. And then finally said, ma'am, what do you do? What do you do for a living? She goes, well, I'm a pharmaceutical rep. We'll get into that. I'm a pharmaceutical rep. And I said, oh yeah, what's that like? She goes, oh man, I travel so much. I got to drive. And I looked at her. I said, that's going to be rough. And she's like, what's that? I said, it's going to be hard to do your job when you don't have your driver's license anymore, isn't it? Hey, Jimmy Johns, thank you for that. Appreciate that. Ed, I'll be answering your question here in just a minute. Really appreciate that. All of you guys. Thank you so much for the super chats. I shouldn't have said what I said. This woman made a mistake. I despise DUI. I think it's something that you should not do. I don't think it should ruin your life unless you're a cop and you get a DUI. I think you should lose your career immediately for that. Immediately lose your career for that. But you don't deserve to have your life ruined, and you don't need a deputy who you're drunk, you're flirtatious, you're probably used to having people do what you want for them because you're attractive. I was a little offended that she thought I could be bought off by being flirted with by a hot chick because, like, let's be honest, nobody looks at this and says, oh, I'm going to hit on that guy. No one wants me in that way. So I was a little offended. I was also a little like, okay, sweetheart, this isn't, like, I know that you're not flirting with me because you think I'm hot. I'm not stupid. So I was offended that she kind of treated me like I was stupid. She treated me like I was easily bought off, treated me like I was stupid, and that I was going to be, easy to manipulate because a hot chick is flirting with the ugly old guy. But I didn't have a right to respond the way that I did. In that moment, I treated her like a piece of shit. And I have always regretted that. Now, Ed Z asks, well, here, I'll put this up. All you did was tell her the truth. I told her the truth, but I did it because I was angry and I wanted to make her feel like shit in that moment. And I recognized it when I said it. I knew what I was doing. But I want to get back to Ed Z's original question. So, um, thanks for asking. I don't. I'm not popular enough to only highlight people who do super chats and answer their questions. I would like to get to the point someday where I have so many questions coming at me that uh, I can only really note the ones that come in by via super chat. But I'm going to still try and treat everybody the same. Playing devil's advocate here, have you ever considered that cops are just sick and tired of being demoralized after the George Floyd fiasco? Uh, I have thought about that a lot, actually, and I've thought about it a terrible amount. And what I will tell you is that it's probably accelerated to some degree since George Floyd, but it has been present in the law enforcement world, in the law enforcement career field, in the institution of policing for a very long time, well before George Floyd, well before, well before. Um, the institution of policing and the career field of law enforcement is corrupt, and it is sick. It is sick. It is it's corrupting the minds, the psyche, and the mentality of the people in law enforcement. There's a question that people ask all the time: does law enforcement create psychopaths, or does it attract psychopaths? And I think it's yes. I think there's a yes aspect to that. Um, there is a reality in which the cluster B personality disorder uh, subset of personality disorder. So it's personality disorder subset cluster B, which includes psychopathy, uh, narcissistic personality disorder, borderline personality disorder, and sociopathy. Um, the law enforcement career field attracts a certain percentage of people with narcissistic personality disorder, along with people with psychopathy. Um, just much like political office holders tend to be somewhere to some degree share a lot of the same traits of psychopathy and narcissism. And when I mean narcissism, I mean clinical narcissism, not just your kind of somewhat narcissistic. So if you look at someone like Donald Trump or um, Kamala Harris, they have the traits, they have all the markers of narcissistic personality disorder, both of them. And when you start to look at law enforcement, many of them either have multiple traits for narcissistic personality disorder or psychopathy as a personality disorder. Doctors have it as well. So there are career fields that are suited to psychopathy. That doesn't mean when somebody is, has narcissistic personality disorder or psychopathy that they're all, they're going to have all the evil that comes with that. But when you put a person in a position of power where they have a badge and they have a gun and they have handcuffs and they have the ability to strip you of your freedom based on their own judgment in a moment, that is going to bring out the worst in people. It doesn't bring out the best most often. There are some times where you do see it. Detective Matt Thornton is a great example of someone that the career field has brought out the best in him. But it's brought out the best in him, and look at what he's doing. He's calling out bad policing because it's brought out the best in him. So there's a reality in which it attracts psychopathy, but there's also a reality in which it creates a form of psychopathy. You become jaded, you become disconnected, you become almost Teflon like in your ability to withstand any kind of empathy or sympathy for people who are having a bad day. And one of the things that I used to teach my new hires Um, most recruits I know have to pass a psychological exam as well as a polygraph exam. Every single officer in the United States that I can think of, and there's probably some agencies out there that don't require it, but almost everybody has to go through some form of what's referred to as a Minnesota multiphasic personality test. But um, lie detector tests very, very rarely used, especially anymore, um, because a lot of the people who uh, enter the career field would not even have to like practice and could pass a lie detector test because they're just self assured. Passing a lie detector test is not hard at all. So I had to take a psychological battery on top. So I had to do the Minnesota multiphasic just to apply, and then I had to meet with the psychologist. And one of the things he says, you pass with flying colors, but I'm going to warn you, within 5 years, you're probably never going to be able to pass this psych eval again. Now imagine having that hang over your head. That's why officers are absolutely terrified of being put up for a fit for duty examination, because they know that they've seen things and done things, and it's over. So no, I don't think it's just because they're sick and tired of how they're being treated since George Floyd died. And I think that George Floyd is example is a very good. Do I think that Derek Chauvin killed George Floyd intentionally? No. Do I think that Derek Chauvin killed George Floyd? Yes. I believe that Derek Chauvin killed George Floyd, and the other three officers there that day killed him as well. And here's how they did it: depraved indifference. I don't think that Derek Chauvin killed George Floyd by putting his knee on his neck. He killed him by not responding to someone who was clearly in medical distress, because they had dehumanized him. And even though it was clear that George Floyd was in medical distress, he was a criminal in their eyes. And they were more worried about the crowd around them than they were worried about what was going on with George Floyd. Was he high? Had he stomached some drugs? Probably. But once you put him in those handcuffs, he's your responsibility. You have a duty to protect him. Steven Skiba says it's definitely attracts those types of individuals. I met some good cops and COs, but far and few. Yep. The narcissistic the narcissistic individuals run off the empathic individuals. Absolutely. Like I was saying, I used to tell my new hires, remember that no matter how bad your day is right now, no matter what's going on in your life, it's not as bad as the person who you are supervising today, because they could get bad news and can't do anything about it. If you get bad news, you can call up Sarge and say, hey, Sarge, I just found out my mom died. Can I go home? The individual that you're supervising or the individual you're interacting with on the street, they, especially if they're locked up, they don't have that option. So you have a duty to treat them like they're a human being. Um, Stephen goes on to say, I've spent a considerable amount of time in both Hennepin County and Ramsey County detention or jails. The COs are worse than the cops, in my opinion. Absolutely. I think that's very fair. I've seen it a lot. Yeah, so a lot of you are making some really good points. So I want to get on to the next story here. Um, we're going to put the video up. We're going to put the video up, but you guys aren't going to really be able to see it because of how I'm formatting today. I'll put a link in so you guys can watch it yourselves. Um, but we're going to stop. I want you to pay very close attention to what you hear in this video. And we'll stop and comment so I can avoid potential copyright strikes. Man sues St. Cloud after canine bite during police encounter. So here we go.
New details now in a Fox 35 investigation. A man bitten by a canine in St. Cloud is now suing the city. We first told you about this story on Friday, and we showed you video of the canine's handler.
Now we have new body cam video from other officers on the scene. Fox 35's Marie Edinger gives us an update on that story.
We learned the St. Cloud police officer being sued in this case, William Wager, had applied first to work for 2 different law enforcement agencies but was not hired. And when he first applied in St. Cloud, he failed his written exam, so he wasn't hired then either. It was only on his second attempt that he wound up getting his job here. We also learned he's only been reprimanded 1 time.
He applied for the job twice. The first time he did not get accepted. He had applied at other agencies and did not get accepted. Applied the second time here, and they took him. Anyway.
In his entire career here, that was in 2023, for insubordination and violation of St. Cloud police policy. He was not reprimanded for sending his canine to bite the man in this.
He was reprimanded for insubordination. I have a problem with that because we don't know what the insubordination was. Sometimes insubordination is not like sucking up to somebody who's in a superior position to you. Sometimes insubordination is you are literally doing something they're telling you not to do, and you're being a jackass about it. It can also be used to get rid of decent people. But what you're about to see is not that act of a decent person.
Incident. We now have video showing not only the canine's attack, but the aftermath.
St. Cloud, we're going to need EMS.
With Martinez, and now his attorney too, wondering how the heck they got to this moment.
I really don't understand why there were long guns along with sidearms, tasers, and a canine unit.
Sorry, guys.
To go ask a 71-year-old man some questions.
Let's break down what the police reports say
go
and
back
what
on
we see
that.
on video. And while Martinez got a call from police telling him to come out, 2 different law enforcement agencies but was not hired. And when he first applied in St. Cloud, he failed his written exam, so he wasn't hired then either. It was only on his second attempt that he wound up getting his job here. We also learned he's only been reprimanded 1 time in his entire career here. That was in 2023 for insubordination and violation of St. Cloud police policy. He was not reprimanded for sending his canine to bite the man in this incident. We now have video showing not only the canine's attack, but the aftermath.
St. Cloud, we're going to need EMS.
With Martinez, and now his attorney too, wondering how the heck they got to this moment.
I really don't understand why there were long guns along with sidearms, tasers, and a canine unit to go ask a 71-year-old man some questions.
Let's break down what the police reports say and what we see on video. And while Martinez got a call from police telling him to come outside with his hands up, so he does.
They call him from outside. They've got their guns pointed at him. He has no idea what's going on. They say, come out with your hands up. He comes out with his hands up. Look at him very closely, folks. His hands are up. He's up. His hands are up.
One officer's description of this is that upon sight of seeing law enforcement, he became irate and began aggressively approaching officers.
Did you see anything in there that shows that he was being aggressive at all? Did you see any aggressive steps on his part? There was nothing aggressive about how he approached. Like, if this is what you think is aggressive, oh, listen, Cupcake, you need to not be in this career field. The cops that see this, and this is the thing, folks, cops are trained to write their reports in a way that makes them look like superheroes while also making them look like cowards. Seriously. Ooh, you responded to this situation so well. You were so afraid, but yet you did your job. What was terrifying about how this man approached? Just watch him again. We're going to go back here. I'm sorry. It's not cooperating with me right at the moment.
New details now in a Fox 35 investigation. A man bitten by a canine in St. Cloud is now suing the city. We first told you about this story on Friday, and we showed you video of the canine's handler.
But was not hired. And when he first applied in St. Cloud, he failed 2023 for incident attack, but the aftermath.
St. Cloud, we're going to need EMS.
With Martinez, and now his attorney too,
Watch this
wondering
again.
how the heck they got to this moment.
I really don't understand why there were long guns along with sidearms, tasers, and a canine unit to go ask a 71-year-old man some questions.
Let's break down what the police
Watch
reports
this.
say and what we see on
Watch
video.
this so close.
And while Martinez got a call from police telling him to come outside with his hands up. So he does. One officer's description of this is that upon sight of seeing law enforcement, he became irate and began aggressively approaching officers. He later told police he was upset with them. He didn't like having a bunch of rifles pointed at him on his own property when he thought he was doing what they'd asked.
Why are you doing that? On the ground, man, on the ground. Get on the ground now. Get on the ground. Get on the ground. You're going to get bit.
He argued
Did you see that? This jackass. Get on the ground or you're going to get bit. The guy was getting on the ground. This is the guy right here. You see him? The one that got written up for insubordination, the one that couldn't pass his test the first time. Look, you got this dude right here. Like, this guy's clearly not armed. He's clearly not armed. Even if you think he's got a gun in his waistband, you've got so many people there, there's no way, like, he is going to get a gun out. Just chill. Wait till you hear why we're in this situation.
with them, confused. I am on the ground. Police say at this time his arms are near his waistband and they were worried he'd reach for a gun.
His arms are near his waistband. What?
He was not armed, and video shows his hands were still out at this time.
He was in a completely...
I also want to point out that these cops are surrounding him. Now they're catching each other in crossfire. Like, cops want to be fucking soldiers, right? These people want to be soldiers. Exactly, Stephen. The cop is the one that got the dog agitated. The cop is the one that got that dog worked up. That dog was not concerned until the cop got all excited. But these cops are surrounding each other. It's turned into kind of a Polish standoff. I use that intentionally.
Missing position right then, and they could have asked him any questions they wanted. Why force him face into his own grass? I'm not sure what the purpose of that was.
One officer's report says he grabbed Martinez's right arm. At the same time, a corporal came up from behind and kicked the 71-year-old forward to get him face down. We see.
Do you see they've got that rifle pushed down into his chest? I'm sorry. Like, one, this dude is lucky that they did not say, I'm afraid for my life. I'm going to have to kill this 71-year-old man who's super confused and doesn't know what's going on.
That on body cam.
Now, this is in Florida, by the way, not Minnesota, but I just want you guys to understand, why the title is this an us problem? Is it a U.S. problem or is it an us problem?
Doesn't fall perfectly forward and starts turning over. Police call that an offensive ground fighting position. The corporal says he feared Martinez was reaching for a gun, so he put the muzzle of his rifle to Martinez's chest and says Martinez used both of his hands to grab the muzzle and push it away from him. We can see on the body camera he does have one hand pushing the officer's hand and the rifle away from him. The other.
Duh. I'm like, you do this to a person, they're going to have a human reaction to this.
Their arm is being bitten by canine coda.
His normal human reaction to get away from the dog, they are then calling resisting arrest.
We also learned more about the incident that led up to all this.
Now listen to this.
Is because someone was hit in the head with a gun. The reason we came with a
No, he hit me first.
Okay.
I'm defending myself.
Police interviewed the people involved and witnesses. One person in the alleged fight claimed he was pistol whipped, but police found no evidence of injuries and said the guy was drunk. He declined to go to the hospital. Witnesses said another guy was hit with the gun too. But when police found that man at a bar nearby, they learned this.
I got told that maybe you got hit.
No, I didn't hit.
With that info, St. Cloud police requested a helicopter to go up and locate Martinez. Then they met up at a park nearby Martinez's home and formed a plan. They were going to call him and ask him to come outside. He'd either be patted down and interviewed or detained and interviewed, depending on his level of compliance.
So all I needed you to do was come outside compliant like you were with me.
I complied.
All I needed you to do was come outside and comply. I don't think I've ever seen anybody more compliant than this 71-year-old man. He came out of his house. Yes, he was upset. I would be upset too if you have guns pointed at me. The question that remains here is, one, if they were that concerned about this situation, where in the world was the warrant? They should have had enough to get a warrant on this. They could have very easily have said, hey, we've got a warrant for your arrest. You need to come on out. I haven't heard word one about a warrant here. His mistake in this situation was coming out of the house. That's where I'm going to give him a lower rate, a lower rating here. If the cops show up at your house and they point guns at your house, you don't go outside. You ask questions like, where's your warrant? We don't need a warrant. Why? Because nothing about this situation shows exigency. They got a helicopter to go up in the air and look for this guy so they could wait for a helicopter to find him before they went and got him out of his house. That shows right there they lack exigency. They absolutely lack exigency. Now listen to the rest of this.
Well, you got me rifles and everything.
Right.
Why?
Martinez spent a few days in the hospital after that canine bite and later had to go back for surgery on his shoulder. In St. Cloud, Marie Edinger, Fox 35 News. So the question is, folks, and I'll pose it to you this way. Is corruption in law enforcement a U.S. problem or an us problem? News is breaking here in Minnesota that the Minnesota Bureau of Criminal Apprehension is ordering all law enforcement agencies in the state of Minnesota to stop using their gas testing for DUI until the machines can be properly calibrated and upgraded by certified technicians, because there are many questions being raised about the testing mechanisms and whether or not they have been producing false positives all across the entire state. Now, the biggest story broke out of Winona County, Minnesota, but that just started the ball rolling. They weren't managing their systems properly. They weren't managing their systems well. We started the first story of Bimpong, who died in custody while having the signs of a stroke. No signs of alcohol, no signs of drug use. Officers recognized he was in a medical crisis. They still brought him to the detention center, still made it clear that he was nothing more than a dirtbag criminal. And so the detention staff failed in their jobs. They didn't do the right thing. They obviously weren't doing well-being checks on him, because by the time the nurse got to him 3 hours and 26 minutes later, he was cold to the touch, which means he died pretty much within an hour of being in that cell. When they said he wet himself when he urinated on himself, that was probably his body letting go of the last of when his systems failed.
They treated him like he was a piece of crap. We have the story of the 71-year-old man in St. Cloud, Florida. We have DUI arrests being and convictions being called into question in the state of Minnesota because of equipment failure. And I'm sorry, that's not just equipment failure. That's literally cops not doing their job. That's literally the criminal injustice system. And I said that the way I did on purpose, the criminal injustice system literally failing to do what it's supposed to do. It's supposed to treat people like they're innocent until they're proven guilty, but they don't. They treat everybody as if they are actually a criminal and that they are guilty all the time. And this 71-year-old man is a perfect freaking example of how they were going off of hearsay statements. Hearsay statements. And they removed this man from his house at the point of military-style weapons and military-style tactics, abused the living piss out of him, and now they're covering their tracks and saying we did nothing wrong. And all of this ties into the story that I have been telling now since April, basically, of Blake Mostad and his family, Minnesota State Trooper Ryan Moser, responding to the call of a wrong-way driver on Highway 10 in Sherburne County, doing over 120 miles an hour, clearly in violation of Minnesota State Statute 169.17 that says that even when responding to an emergency, you must respond in such a way with your lights and your sirens going that you are still driving with due care and caution. And he paralyzes Blake, almost killing him, and he just walks away from the crime. Folks, we do not have a problem with criminality in the U.S. until we start to address the fact that we have a problem with criminality in law enforcement. There is a problem of corruption in law enforcement, folks. And the worst part of it is that the problem of corruption in law enforcement, they get to cover for each other. They get to cover for themselves. It's not just that agencies can investigate themselves and determine that they did nothing wrong. It's that agencies get to pick who ultimately investigates them, and then they can rely on that agency to do what they need done to protect themselves. And so this big sick system protects itself. And so, yes, we have a problem in the United States. We do have a US problem, but we have an us problem too, because so many of us sit back and say, I don't want to get involved. I don't want to be part of this. I don't want to say anything. I don't want to pick up a camera and go out and film local law enforcement. I don't want to go out and film the troopers or the deputies or the cops, or I don't want to film local government officials doing their jobs. I don't want to be involved. I just want to get through life casually and peacefully. I don't want anything to do with this. I don't want anything at all to go on. Like I don't want to be an auditor. And I'm like telling people to be an auditor. Like there are auditors out there, are First Amendment auditors out there that make me sick because of how they treat everybody. But there are people like AVA watching who he picks up his camera to go and show how he's treated by the Department of Veterans Affairs. And the next thing you know, he's got doctors turning him in, claiming that he's a danger. Skipper, one of my co-hosts, along with AVA from Veteran Nation, has had to record things, and he's been treated like crap. He's recorded being assaulted by his ex and her boyfriend, her lover, and was treated like crap by law enforcement over that. Treated like crap by the Marine Corps over that. Like, folks, none of this goes away. None of this changes. Nothing happens until we all stand up and say we're not taking this anymore. I'm going to stop making excuses for people in uniform. I'm going to stop making excuses for people who work in government. You don't get the benefit of the doubt anymore. If I don't get the benefit of the doubt, if Bimpong, a postal worker in Dakota County, Minnesota, if he doesn't get the benefit of the doubt, why the fuck do the cops get the benefit of the doubt? You tell me. Why? Why do they get the benefit of the doubt and we don't? Why are so many Americans who consider themselves traditional conservative types, why do so many of them automatically err on the side of law enforcement and say, like the guy said earlier, act like a dirtbag, get treated like a dirtbag? And the reason why is you've been conditioned to believe that cops are always right, and that when someone's having an interaction with law enforcement, they must be wrong. So they deserve whatever they get. And so we have Antifa coin the phrase F around and find out. FAFO. And NormieCon, fake conservative, fake patriots, fake liberty-loving people pick up the FAFO, and now they carry it as a badge of honor to throw out anytime they see cops doing something that's just absolutely dehumanizing to their fellow Americans. From their local street cops to their state patrol to the federal police. The memory on people who back in 2020 who were losing their crap over how their government was treating them over a virus. These same people who lost their crap about how the FBI and others are treating people from January 6th. People who lost their crap over how the fake kidnapping of plot for Gretchen Whitmer are now all of a sudden they've forgotten all of that and they're out there back the blue at all cost. Nothing is going to change in this country until people who, no matter what side of the political spectrum, no matter what side of the Overton window you find yourself, whether you consider yourself a leftist or you consider yourselves a right-winger, nothing's going to change until all of you wake up and come together and start to fight the system together. You have to start fighting the system together. Jake Fletcher, if you're talking about the fake kidnapping plot on Gretchen Whitmer, yeah, it was fake. I could show you the receipts. Watch the documentary Kidnap and Kill. Listen to my interview with Steve Friend, who was on the SWAT team that was part of that. A former FBI agent who was on the SWAT team that went in to make those arrests. He'll flat out tell you that it was a staged event set up by the FBI. It was an entrapment. See, people are set up constantly in this country. People are presented with what looks like no option but to take plea deals. And if you don't take this plea deal, then we're going to make your life a living hell. You're never going to get out of prison. You're never going to, get out of lockup. And a lot of people can't afford an attorney that's willing to, really fight. A lot of the people that get targeted don't have a way to fight back. So they get a public defender who works for the government, whose one goal is to get that file closed as soon as possible. And they convince their clients to take plea deals because it's only for their better. And they end up with records that they don't deserve because they didn't have anybody that was willing to stand in the corner and fight for them. And it all starts with the crooked nature of law enforcement at every level, from your local municipal cop in your tiny little town all the way up to state law enforcement and federal law enforcement. Everybody tells me, man, TC, it's only a few bad apples. It's just a few of them. It's not all of them. It's just a few. And as I said last week in my stream from Sherburne County Sheriff's Office, one bad apple makes all the other apples around it bad. Good apples never make a bad apple a good apple. And if you know you're working around a bad apple and you don't do anything to get rid of that bad apple, then you're a bad apple too. I will try to link these stories in the comments here so you guys can go check them out yourselves. I'm also going to put a link to, and this is for anybody, I'm going to put a link with my Upside referral in it. If you're like me, budget's tight, and you don't have a lot of money, this is not paid, by the way. It's not a paid endorsement, but I've been using Upside for the last several years, and I have saved over $350 just by putting gas in my car. I've never used it for anything other than putting gas in my car. Just click on the Upside and put the link in, and or I click on where I'm buying gas, and I save anywhere from 5 to sometimes up to 40 cents per gallon in cash back. So if money's tight for you and you want a way to be able to like earn some cash back, check out the Upside link that's going to be in the description of this video. I cannot thank you guys enough for tuning in. Cannot thank the super chatters enough for that. And I hope you guys will come back and share this after it's finished processing. One more comment to read. Adam Fox was sentenced to 16 years in prison. Barry Croft Jr. received a sentence of just over 19 and a half years. And Ty Garbin received 2.5 years after pleading guilty and cooperating with the prosecutor. Ryan, it was a fake kidnapping plot. You need to check out Kidnap and Kill documentary put on by an investigative journalist. She goes by Radix Verum on Twix, I call it. Radix Verum, and I'll try and link that in here as well, brings the receipts. Steve Friend, an FBI agent SWAT team member on the ground that day, brings the receipts. It was a setup. It was absolutely 100% a setup from the beginning. It was entrapment. And do not be surprised if some of those people will see their sentences overturned, because there were people who actually went to court and won. These guys took pleas. Kidnap and Kill by Radix Verum. She is phenomenal. And I will try and link my interview with her in here later. I'm gonna run off and help the other half buy some groceries, Mrs. MBRR. So they pled guilty because they were told they had no choice but to plead guilty or go to jail for literally a life sentence. Just because a person pleads guilty, Ryan, doesn't mean that they actually think they're guilty. I watched how the system works. I literally have watched how the system works. I spent 13 years inside of the system watching people plead out to stuff because they know they're being railroaded. The criminal justice system is actually the criminal injustice system. People get railroaded by it all the time. And people end up with criminal records all the time that shouldn't have criminal records because they don't have anybody in their corner. Because that's how the system is set up. I love that you're here, Ryan. Like your feedback. Hope you stick around. I hope you subscribe. I hope you watch and listen. I'm going to end this here because I got things I need to do, and I hope you guys have a great rest of your Saturday, and I hope that you have a good Sunday, and look for more content coming out soon. Till next time, my friends, fight for your freedom. It is yours. Fight for your liberty. It belongs to you. And Sic Semper Tyrannis.
We are go for liftoff in T-minus 30. Stand by for further instructions, Minnesota Black Robe Regiment.
Secondary guidance systems engaged.
Minnesota Black Robe Regiment, it will be on my mark. Minnesota the target. You are authorized to fire at will.